Hey guys, tonight we're starting somewhere so ordinary that it almost feels boring at first glance, which is usually where history hides its best surprises. You're standing near a fire, not a dramatic one, just a practical one, the kind that keeps teeth from chattering and predators at a respectful distance. This is long before laws, before labels, before anyone has ever said the word substance abuse. And you probably won't survive this, statistically speaking, but that's true of almost everyone around you too, so it feels less personal. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, drop your city and the time you're listening from in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You crouch close to the flames, watching sparks snap and lift into the dark. The fire isn't just warmth, it's a new smell, a new texture in the air. Something green and fibrous has been tossed in, maybe by accident, maybe because it was nearby, and the smoke changes. It thickens, sweetens, curls differently as it hits your nose. You inhale because breathing is automatic, not because you're curious, and for a moment nothing happens. Then your head feels lighter, or heavier, or maybe sideways in a way you don't have words for yet. The shadows start behaving strangely. They don't just flicker, they perform. This is the day humans first get high, and nobody writes it down. There's no announcement, no warning label, no elder clearing their throat to explain the consequences. One of the great historical facts here is that the controlled use of fire dates back at least 400,000 years, possibly much earlier, which means smoke inhalation wasn't rare. It was a nightly companion. What's debated still is whether early humans intentionally burned psychoactive plants or stumbled into altered states accidentally. Some scholars argue it was pure chance. Others say curiosity has always been humanity's loudest instinct. You feel that instinct now, buzzing gently behind your eyes. You sit there longer than usual. Time stretches, not dramatically, just enough to be noticeable. The crackle of wood sounds rhythmic, almost organised, like it's trying to tell you something, if you'd only listen properly. Your body relaxes in a way that doesn't match the danger of your world. Teeth and claws exist out there, but right now they feel theoretical. This sensation, this soft detachment, doesn't have a name yet, but it's going to be very popular. Someone else notices you're acting strange. Maybe you're smiling at nothing. Maybe you're staring into the fire like it owes you money. They sit closer, inhale the same air, and suddenly it's not just you. That's important. Intoxication, from the very beginning, is social. A quirky detail researchers love to point out is that many animals seem to seek intoxication on purpose. Reindeer eating psychedelic mushrooms, jaguars chewing hallucinogenic vines, which suggests that altered states aren't a human glitch but a biological feature. Watching others join you by the fire, it feels less like a mistake and more like a discovery. Your brain, still very much under construction, responds enthusiastically. Neurologically, modern humans have receptors perfectly suited to interact with compounds found in plants like cannabis and certain fungi. That's not coincidence, it's coevolution. The open debate is whether those receptors evolved for internal regulation and just happened to respond to drugs, or whether humans and plants shaped each other over tens of thousands of years through repeated use. Sitting here, slightly unmoored from ordinary perception, you can't tell which theory is right, but you can feel that something ancient just clicked into place. The fire becomes a focus point. Faces emerge in the embers, patterns loop and repeat. Your mind starts making connections faster than usual, some of them useful, some of them nonsense, all of them fascinating. This might be the first time you've ever experienced imagination untethered from immediate survival, and that's dangerous but also revolutionary. You laugh quietly, surprising yourself. Laughter in this world is rare and precious, usually reserved for safety. This feels like borrowing joy from the future. There's a downside, of course, though you don't recognize it yet. Your reaction's slow. If something rushed the camp right now, you'd be less prepared. This is where the scholarly debate deepens. Did intoxication help human evolution by enhancing creativity, bonding and ritual, or did it endanger survival? Some anthropologists suggest altered states contributed to language, art, and religion. Others argue those benefits came later, once humans learned control. Right now, control is not part of the package. As the smoke thins and the fire dies down, the sensation fades. That's important too. You come back. The world snaps into sharper focus, and there's a faint disappointment in that. You want to remember what just happened, but memory is slippery when language is limited. Still, something sticks. A lesson without words. Certain plants, certain fires, certain moments can change how reality feels. You lie down later, staring at a sky unpolluted by anything but stars. Your body is tired, your mind oddly alert. You don't know it, but tonight you've crossed a threshold humanity will revisit again and again. Not always wisely, not always safely, but always deliberately. Tomorrow, or next week, or next season, someone will throw that same plant into the fire on purpose. And when they do, the day humans first got high will quietly become a tradition. You wake with the dull stiffness of a body that slept on the ground, and the sharper awareness of a mind that remembers something unusual happened. Not clearly, not like a story you can retell, but like a feeling lodged behind the eyes. The fire pit is cold now, just a ring of ash and blackened stones, but you look at it longer than necessary. Something about last night mattered. You don't have a word for experience, but you have the urge to repeat it, which is honestly more powerful. The day moves on the way days always do here. Hunting, gathering, watching the horizon like it personally owes you safety. Yet you notice small changes in yourself. Sounds seem slightly richer. You're paying attention to plants in a new way, not just as food or poison, but as options. This is where brains start outrunning rules. There are no elders wagging fingers about altered states because nobody knows they exist yet. Trial and error is the curriculum, and error usually means death, which really sharpens the learning process. At some point, someone gathers the same fibrous plant from last night. Maybe it's you. Maybe you're not even sure why you're doing it, just that your hands remember. This is one of the earliest historical patterns we can reasonably infer. Repetition follows novelty fast in human behaviour. Archaeological evidence suggests early humans were extremely attentive to cause and effect in their environment. If a plant eased pain, calmed fear, or made long nights feel shorter, it didn't stay a secret for long. The debate is whether this knowledge spread casually or was guarded. Looking around, it feels communal, but humans have always been excellent at hoarding advantages. The fire is lit again, and this time the plant goes in deliberately. The smoke curls upward, familiar now. You inhale more deeply. There's a sense of control this time, or at least intention, and that changes the experience. The sensation returns, gentler, almost welcoming. Your muscles loosen, your thoughts wander without panicking. Someone hums, someone else taps a stone in rhythm. No one planned this, yet here it is. A proto-ritual forming in real time. A quirky but well-supported fact is that rhythm and altered states are deeply linked in the human brain. Drumming, chanting, repetitive motion, all of them can induce trance-like experiences even without substances. Add smoke or fermented plants, and the effect multiplies. Scholars argue over which came first, the drug or the rhythm. Did humans invent ritual to frame intoxication, or did intoxication demand structure to make sense of it? Sitting here, wrapped in sound and scent, it feels like both arrived together, holding hands. You notice something else too. Fear doesn't vanish, but it softens. Pain fades to the background. A small cut on your hand, normally an obsession, barely registers. This is where intoxication quietly becomes medicine. Long before pharmacies, Humans were self-experimenting with analgesics and anxiolytics pulled straight from the ground. The line between healing and escaping is blurry, and always has been. Some scholars argue that early drug use was primarily therapeutic. Others point out that humans are very good at justifying pleasure as treatment. Not everyone reacts the same way. One person gets quiet, withdrawn, staring into nothing. Another becomes animated, talking too fast, gesturing wildly. You file this away. Same smoke, different minds. This variability will cause problems later, but for now it's just interesting. It hints at individuality, at internal worlds that don't line up perfectly. That realization alone is intoxicating. As the effects wear off again, there's discussion, gestures, sounds, shared looks. Communication stretches to accommodate the experience. Some anthropologists believe altered states accelerated symbolic thinking and language development, forcing humans to describe the indescribable. Others think that's giving drugs too much credit. That language would have evolved anyway. But tonight, you struggle to convey what you felt, and in that struggle, something new is born. Metaphor. There's caution now too. Someone coughs too hard. Someone gets dizzy and lies down too fast. You realise this isn't pure gift. It demands respect. This is the beginning of boundaries, of informal rules. Don't burn too much. Don't do it before the hunt. Don't do it alone. These aren't laws, just instincts hardened by observation. Control starts here, not with authority, but with survival. When you finally sleep, the dreams are vivid, layered, strange. Images overlap. Animals speak without mouths. Fire moves like water. You wake unsettled but intrigued. Whatever this thing is, this smoke, this feeling, it's not a one-night anomaly. It's a tool, a doorway, a risk. And from now on, every time you pass that plant, every time you build a fire, your mind will remember that the world has a hidden setting you can access if you choose. You start to notice patterns, which is what humans do best when they're not busy panicking. Certain plants get you fed, certain ones kill you, and a few of them, quietly, mysteriously, change how the inside of your head behaves. You don't know the word psychoactive, but you know the feeling now, the subtle shift like the ground tilting just enough to remind you it can move. Your group begins to treat these plants differently, not with fear, but with a cautious kind of interest. This is where plants that bite back enter the story. Leaves that make your mouth tingle, roots that warm your chest, berries that blur the edges of the world. You don't eat them by the handful, you taste them. Wait, watch. This slow, deliberate testing is one of the most impressive historical facts about early humans. Despite lacking formal science, they built massive mental databases of botanical effects through collective memory. The open debate is how much of this knowledge came from observation versus imitation of animals. Watching a deer stagger after chewing a certain plant might look alarming, but watching it survive might look instructive. One day you chew something you probably shouldn't have, at least not alone. The bitterness is aggressive, like the plant is warning you personally. Time stretches uncomfortably this time. Your heart feels louder. The world doesn't soften, it sharpens, edges turning jagged. This is likely one of humanity's first bad trips, though nobody calls it that. You curl inward, breathing shallow, convinced something is wrong. And maybe something is. Early intoxication isn't curated. Dosage is guesswork. Set and setting are whatever happens to be happening. Someone stays near you. That matters. They don't fix anything, but their presence anchors you. This is another lesson that sticks. Altered states are safer when shared. Anthropologists point out that many traditional societies insisted on guides or sitters for visionary experiences, a practice that likely emerged from moments exactly like this. The quirky detail here is that modern clinical research has independently rediscovered this rule centuries later with clipboards and consent forms. When the fear fades, it leaves behind something unexpected. insight. Not a vision of gods or the universe, just a clearer sense of your own limits. You remember which plant did this. You remember how much you took. Knowledge sharpens. The group adjusts. That plant becomes one for special occasions, or maybe never again. This is how classification begins, not with Latin names, but with stories and scars. Over time, certain individuals show more interest in these experiences than others. They volunteer to test. They remember details. They interpret dreams like they're decoding messages. Without realizing it, you're watching the earliest division of labour around altered states. These people aren't leaders yet, but they're becoming something adjacent. Shamans before the job title exists. Scholars argue about whether these roles emerged because of drugs, or whether drugs amplified pre-existing tendencies toward introspection and empathy. Standing on the edge of a firelit circle, it feels like both. There's another layer now too. Meaning. Experiences while intoxicated don't just feel strange, they feel important. The human brain is excellent at assigning significance to intense sensations. A pattern in the flames becomes a sign. A sudden thought feels like truth. This is where belief systems quietly sneak in. One academic argument suggests that religion itself may have been catalyzed by altered states, that gods were first encountered in smoke and trance. Critics counter that social structure and survival pressures explain religion just fine. You don't care about the argument, you care that the night feels full of messages. You start to associate certain plants with certain outcomes. One for pain, one for fear, one for visions. This is pharmacology in its infancy, practiced without scales or writing, guided by memory and caution. It's also incredibly fragile. Lose the people who know, and the knowledge disappears. This may explain why evidence of early drug use is patchy in the archaeological record. Not because it didn't happen, but because oral traditions are easy to erase. As seasons pass, these practices settle into the background of life. Not every day, not casual, but available. You don't always step through the doorway, but you know where it is. That knowledge alone changes you. You understand now that reality has layers, and that the default setting isn't the only one humans can access. That realization is intoxicating in its own right. Lying awake, sober and thoughtful, you sense the future stretching outward. Trade routes, rituals, rules, wars over who gets access and who doesn't. You can't see the specifics yet, but you can feel the trajectory. The day humans first got high wasn't a single moment. It was the beginning of a relationship. Complicated, risky, deeply human, and you're already in it. By now, the altered state isn't a surprise anymore. It's a destination. You don't stumble into it as often, you approach it. There's a difference between accidentally getting caught in the rain and deciding to walk into a river, and this feels like the second one. The group has learned that certain nights are better for it. After food is secured, when children are sleeping, when the world feels momentarily stable. You're starting to see structure appear, thin at first, like lines drawn in sand. Drums enter the scene not as instruments but as tools, hollowed logs, stretched hides, hands striking in repetition until sound becomes texture. The rhythm doesn't entertain you, it carries you. Your breathing sinks to it, your thoughts fall into step. This is one of those solid historical facts that shows up everywhere. Trance states across cultures almost always involve rhythm. Whether it's drumming, clapping, chanting, or even walking, repetition nudges the brain into a different gear. Scholars still debate whether rhythm alone was enough to induce these states, or whether substances amplified something already happening. Sitting here, you feel the answer is unhelpfully yes. The cave becomes important now, not just as shelter, but as a space that feels separate from ordinary life. Firelight crawls across stone walls, animating cracks and mineral stains into moving forms. You see animals that aren't there, or maybe always were. A bison exhales. A hand reaches. This is where art slips quietly into existence. The open scholarly debate is whether cave paintings were purely symbolic records, hunting magic, storytelling, or whether they were visual echoes of hallucinations experienced during altered states. You don't know you're participating in a debate. You just know the wall feels alive. Someone traces a shape with charcoal. You recognize it immediately, even though it's abstract. That recognition hits deeper than logic. Your chest tightens. This matters. The quirky fact here is that many geometric patterns seen in ancient art closely resemble entoptic phenomena, visual effects produced by the human nervous system during trance or intoxication. Spirals, grids, zigzags. They come from inside the brain, not outside, which raises an uncomfortable question modern scholars still wrestle with. Were early humans depicting the world or their own minds? As the smoke thickens, your sense of self loosens. You don't disappear, but your edges blur. The boundary between you and the group softens. This is bonding on a neurological level, oxytocin and serotonin quietly doing their thing, though you don't have words for chemicals yet. You just know you feel connected. This may be one of intoxication's most underestimated roles in human history, social glue. Some researchers argue that shared altered states strengthened group cohesion, making cooperation easier in a dangerous world. Others warn that this romanticizes something that could just as easily cause division. Right now, it's doing the former. Time becomes unreliable. Minutes stretch. Moments loop. Someone tells a story and it feels ancient even though you watched it happen last week. Myth starts forming not because people lie, but because memory behaves differently in these states. Details shift, emotions intensify. This is how stories grow teeth and claws over generations. You're not just hearing history, you're watching it mutate. Not everyone is welcome here. You notice that. Children are kept back. Outsiders hover at the edge. Access becomes selective. This is a subtle but crucial shift. Altered states are no longer just experiences, they're privileges. Anthropologists point out that many later societies restricted ritual intoxication to specific roles: shamans, priests, initiates. The debate is whether this was about safety, power, or both. Watching who sits closest to the fire, it's hard not to suspect power had a say. There's danger too creeping back in. Someone panics. Someone laughs too loud. A spark jumps and nearly catches dry grass. You're reminded that being less alert around fire is a terrible evolutionary strategy. Rules tighten a little. Someone gestures sharply. The rhythm slows. Control asserts itself. This balance, between letting go and staying alive, will define humanity's relationship with intoxication forever. When the night ends, you emerge from the cave blinking, the stars feeling oddly flat compared to what you just saw on stone walls. The ordinary world feels thinner, less saturated. That feeling lingers. It changes how you move through the next day, how you look at rock and shadow and flame. You've seen something beneath the surface and you can't unsee it. You don't call this sacred yet, but you treat it carefully. You understand now that altered minds can reshape reality, not physically, but socially, symbolically, emotionally. Caves become more than caves. Drums become more than noise. Plants become more than food. The night becomes a place you can go, not just endure. And as you walk back into daylight, you carry the quiet certainty that humans are no longer just surviving the world, they're interpreting it. You begin to realize that once something works, humans will repeat it until it becomes tradition. The altered nights stop being spontaneous and start showing up on an unspoken calendar. After a successful hunt, before a long migration, when someone dies. These moments carry emotional weight, and intoxication slips neatly into that space, amplifying feelings already close to the surface. You're not just getting high anymore, you're marking time. The cave fills again, but this time the preparation feels deliberate. The fire is smaller, controlled. The plants are dried, not tossed in green and guessy. Someone crushes leaves between stones, releasing a sharp, familiar scent. This matters. It's one of those quiet historical facts that tends to get overlooked. Preparation techniques drastically change how substances affect the body. Drying, fermenting, heating. Early humans discovered these processes through patience and failure, long before chemistry existed as a concept. Scholars still debate how intentional these refinements were at first, but standing here, you can tell this isn't accidental anymore. The rhythm starts slower tonight. Not everyone participates equally. A few people sit back, observing. Others lean in, breathing deeply. Roles are forming, even if nobody has named them. There are those who guide, those who follow, and those who abstain. Abstinence isn't judgment yet. It's preference. That will change later. For now, it's just another variation in human behaviour. You notice someone new taking the lead. They've done this before. They know when to add the plant, when to pull it back. They watch faces closely, adjusting the pace of the night like a musician reading a room. This is one of those fringe but plausible ideas anthropologists discuss, that the first specialists in altered states were also the first therapists. They soothed panic, reframed fear, interpreted meaning. Whether that makes them healers or manipulators is still an open debate, and honestly the answer might be both. As the smoke settles in your lungs, the world loosens again. But now there's direction. Someone speaks softly, guiding attention inward, toward memory, toward feeling. You recall a loss you don't usually touch. The ache surfaces, sharp but manageable. Tears come without embarrassment. This is new. In a world where vulnerability can be fatal, this space allows it. Some researchers argue that ritual intoxication provided early humans with emotional processing tools long before language could handle complexity. Others say that's projecting modern psychology backward. All you know is that something inside you just shifted. The visions tonight are less chaotic. Shapes repeat. Symbols return from previous nights. This repetition is important. It builds a shared internal vocabulary. When someone later gestures to a spiral or a line of dots, you understand what they mean without explanation. This is culture forming in real time, fed by altered perception and reinforced by memory. A quirky fact here is that many traditional symbols across unrelated cultures look eerily similar, which raises the possibility that human brains, when altered, default to the same visual patterns. Not everyone is comfortable with how powerful this feels. You sense unease on the edges. A few people whisper later outside the cave, "Is this safe? Is this inviting something dangerous?" Fear enters the conversation, and where fear goes, control follows. Someone suggests limits, someone else agrees. You're witnessing the birth of regulation, not imposed by rulers, but negotiated by peers. The debate among scholars is whether early restrictions around intoxication were about health or authority. Watching these discussions, it's clear they're about both even now. The night ends more quietly than before. There's no dramatic collapse into sleep, just a gentle tapering off, like embers cooling. You walk out feeling lighter, but also aware that this thing you've discovered is not neutral. It can heal, it can bond, it can unsettle. Power always comes with a cost, and humans have never been great at paying attention to that part. The next day you notice how the group treats the cave differently. It's cleaner, respected. Not sacred exactly, but close. You don't hunt there, you don't argue there. Certain spaces are being set aside from ordinary life. This separation, profane versus special, is a building block of religion, though nobody would recognize it as such yet. Scholars argue endlessly about whether intoxication created sacred space, or sacred space legitimized intoxication. Standing at the cave entrance, it feels like they grew together. You move forward with a quiet understanding now. Altered states aren't just experiences, they're tools for shaping emotion, memory, and belief. Used carefully, they strengthen the group. Used carelessly, they threaten it. That tension settles into your bones. You know future generations will struggle with it too, long after this cave is forgotten, and its walls crumble back into silence. At some point someone brings honey. Not the safe kind you scoop without thinking, but a thick, dark version scraped from a high, dangerous place, where bees behave like they're guarding secrets. You taste it cautiously. It's bitter under the sweetness, sharp enough to make your tongue hesitate. This is the honey that shouldn't be eaten, though nobody knows that yet. Within an hour, people are sitting down very suddenly, laughing at nothing, staring at hands like they've never seen hands before. This is one of those wonderfully specific historical facts. Mad honey, contaminated with granulotoxins from certain flowers, has been documented causing intoxication and hallucinations for thousands of years, including later accounts of entire armies accidentally poisoning themselves. You're not surprised. By now your world is full of substances that alter perception. Plants, smoke, fermented fruit, now honey. Intoxication is no longer a novelty, it's a category. The debate scholars still argue about is whether humans actively sought these substances, or simply kept bumping into them and deciding they were worth the trouble. From where you're standing, slightly dizzy, warm and amused, it feels very much like seeking. The effect is different from the smoke, heavier, slower. Your body feels disconnected from your intentions, like there's a delay between thought and motion. This is less about visions and more about surrender. You lie back, watching clouds rearrange themselves into improbable animals. Someone nearby vomits and then laughs about it, which becomes contagious laughter, the kind that hurts your ribs and makes breathing feel optional. This isn't sacred, it's messy. And that matters too. A quirky detail researchers love is that many early intoxicants caused physical symptoms modern users would consider unacceptable. Nausea, dizziness, weakness. Yet people still return to them. This suggests the value wasn't just pleasure, but the experience itself. Altered consciousness, even uncomfortable, was worth exploring. That tells you something important about the human brain. It's not optimized for comfort. It's optimized for meaning. Not everyone approves. You notice that. A few people avoid the honey entirely, watching with tight expressions. This is the beginning of moral judgment creeping in. Not formal yet, just a feeling that some altered states are wrong in a way others aren't. Anthropologists debate whether early societies categorized substances by safety, usefulness, or symbolism. Watching reactions split along lines of tolerance and fear, you suspect symbolism is already doing a lot of work. The day after the honey is rough, heads ache, bodies feel unreliable. This is your first communal hangover. Productivity drops. Someone snaps at someone else. The cost becomes visible. This matters because consequences shape culture faster than philosophy ever will. You start to see intoxication being reserved for specific times again, rather than whenever someone feels like it. Excess teaches restraint better than lectures. Animals wander through the edges of your camp and you notice something odd. A goat chews on fermenting fruit and stumbles. Birds peck at berries and behave strangely. This isn't just a human thing. A fringe but increasingly accepted idea in biology is that intoxication-seeking behaviour exists across species, suggesting evolutionary advantages, or at least persistent curiosity. You watch, fascinated, as a monkey deliberately returns to the same plant that made it woozy yesterday. The line between instinct and experimentation blurs. You start connecting dots. If animals do this, and humans do this, maybe altered states aren't a glitch. Maybe they're a feature. Some scholars argue that occasional intoxication may have helped early humans escape rigid thinking patterns, encouraging creativity and problem solving. Others counter that this is romantic nonsense layered over dangerous behaviour. Both arguments feel incomplete. What you're living through is more complicated than either side wants to admit. The group talks more now, not just about what happened, but about why. Meaning is being layered onto experience after the fact. Someone suggests the honey lets you hear ancestors. Someone else says it weakens the body and invites danger. Both ideas coexist without resolution. This tolerance for contradiction is another subtle side effect of altered states. You're getting used to holding multiple explanations at once. Eventually rules harden a little more. Honey is shared less often, smoke rituals remain, fermented fruit is allowed only after work is done. These aren't commandments carved in stone, they're habits reinforced by memory. This is governance in its earliest, softest form. Scholars still argue whether intoxication drove social complexity or merely adapted to it. Watching these negotiations unfold, it's clear the relationship goes both ways. As night falls again, you sit sober by the fire, listening to stories exaggerated by time and retelling. You feel different now, not just because of what you've taken, but because of what you've learned. The world is full of substances that can change you, and humans are uniquely determined to catalogue them, argue about them, ritualize them, and occasionally ruin their own day with them. You stare into the flames, calm, grounded, very much here. Getting high didn't pull you away from reality. It expanded it. And now that you know how wide reality can stretch, it's hard to imagine ever wanting it small again. Movement changes everything. You don't stay in one place long enough anymore for the cave to define you. The land pulls you onward. Seasons shift. Animals migrate. Water disappears and reappears somewhere else like it's playing a game. And wherever you go, you carry knowledge with you. Not written, not formal, but embedded in habits and stories. You remember which plants calm, which excite, which unmoor. Intoxication becomes portable. On the move, you notice something new. Not all altered states come from smoke or chewing. Some come from waiting. Hunger sharpens perception. Exhaustion blurs it. Long walks under a relentless sun do strange things to your thoughts. Scholars debate whether these naturally induced altered states shaped human spirituality as much as substances did. From inside your body they feel inseparable. A trance is a trance, whether it comes from rhythm, smoke, or sheer physical strain. Then someone forgets fruit in a skin bag for too long. When it's opened days later, the smell is sharp, almost aggressive. The liquid inside tastes wrong, and then very right. Warmth spreads quickly. Laughter follows faster than usual. This is fermentation making its quiet entrance into human history. A solid historical fact. Evidence of fermented beverages appears surprisingly early in the archaeological record, suggesting humans may have been intentionally producing alcohol for thousands of years. The debate is whether this was discovered by accident or pursued on purpose. Given how fast people reach for the bag again, intention feels likely. Alcohol is different. Social. Fast. It doesn't open visions so much as it lowers walls. You talk more, touch more, argue louder. This is intoxicating in a different way, and immediately disruptive. Small tensions surface. Old grudges gain volume. Someone says something they shouldn't have. Someone laughs when they shouldn't. You learn quickly that not all altered states make people gentle. A quirky detail modern researchers love is that alcohol affects the brain's inhibition centers before impairing motor control, which explains why people feel confident long before they are capable. You don't know that biology, but you know the outcome. Swagger without skill. This substance will cause problems, you can already tell. Still it spreads. Easily. Fruit is everywhere. Fermentation doesn't require rare plants or special caves. Anyone can stumble into it. This accessibility changes the power dynamics around intoxication. No gatekeepers, no rituals yet, just availability. Anthropologists argue that this democratization of altered states may have forced societies to create stricter rules later on. Watching the camp sway and shout, you understand why. The morning after is instructive. Heads ache. Words spoken last night linger uncomfortably. Someone avoids someone else's eyes. This is the first time intoxication creates social damage rather than cohesion. That matters. You start seeing distinctions form. Some substances are for insight, others for bonding, others for release, and some maybe for trouble. Classification deepens. As you travel, you encounter other groups. Exchanges happen cautiously at first. Tools, food, gestures. Then someone offers a taste of something unfamiliar. A root you've never seen. A brew with a smell that suggests danger. This is trade before money, and intoxication is part of the currency. A fringe but compelling theory suggests that psychoactive substances played a role in early trade networks because they were valuable, portable, and culturally significant. Sharing a high becomes a way to share trust. You sit with strangers, altered together, and feel something loosen. Differences soften. Laughter bridges gaps. Language can't. This doesn't always end well, but when it does, it forges bonds faster than sober negotiation ever could. Scholars still argue whether intoxication facilitated cooperation between groups or increased conflict. You've seen both. The substance doesn't decide. Humans do. Over time, reputations form. Some groups are known for calming smoke, others for dangerous brews. Knowledge becomes identity. You learn where not to drink. You learn whose rituals demand respect. This is culture mapping itself onto chemistry. Intoxication stops being just an experience and starts being a marker of who you are and who you aren't. As night falls in a new place, unfamiliar stars overhead, you feel the familiar pull toward altered perception. Not as escape, but as orientation. It helps you feel at home in a strange land. That alone might explain its persistence. Humans, endlessly adaptable, use intoxication not just to leave reality, but to survive it. You lie back, listening to unfamiliar insects, your mind steady and alert. Wherever humans go next, and they will go everywhere, they won't go alone. They'll bring fire, stories, and the knowledge that reality has more than one setting, and sometimes switching between them makes the journey bearable. The more you travel, the more crowded the spirit world gets. That's the best way to describe it, even though you don't have the language yet. Once altered states become familiar, they stop being empty experiences and start filling up with characters, rules, and expectations. When you inhale the smoke now, you don't just feel different. You enter a place that already feels inhabited. Shapes have personalities. Sensations carry intentions. You're not alone in there anymore. This is where belief systems quietly thicken. Not overnight, not dramatically, but layer by layer. Someone sees the same animal during multiple trance nights. Someone else dreams of a figure that seems to guide, warn, or mock them. Patterns repeat across people, which is unsettling and comforting at the same time. A key historical fact here is that many early mythologies feature animals and hybrid beings that closely resemble visions reported during altered states. Scholars still debate whether these beings were invented symbolically or experienced directly and later rationalized as gods. Sitting in the smoke, the distinction feels irrelevant. You start hearing phrases repeated before intoxication begins, spoken intentions, requests, warnings. Go gently. Show us what we need. These aren't prayers yet, but they're leaning that way. The open debate among anthropologists is whether ritual language evolved to control altered states or to interpret them after the fact. From the inside, it feels like both. Words shape the experience, and the experience reshapes the words right back. There's a noticeable shift now. Intoxication isn't just about what happens to you, but what happens for the group. Someone enters trance to find lost animals. Someone else seeks insight about illness. This is a turning point. Altered states become functional beyond emotion. Whether they actually provide reliable information is another question entirely. Skeptics argue that confirmation bias did the heavy lifting. Believers argue that survival itself proves the method worked. You just know that people feel helped, and in human history, perception often matters more than accuracy. A quirky but fascinating detail is that many cultures independently developed the idea that intoxication allows communication with non-human intelligences, spirits, ancestors, forces of nature. This universality suggests either a shared neurological experience or a shared storytelling instinct, or both. Watching someone speak in a voice that doesn't sound like their own, you understand why this idea sticks. It feels real in a way logic struggles to challenge. Not all experiences are welcome. Some nights bring fear back with a vengeance. Someone screams. Someone runs. These moments are explained, not dismissed. You went too far. You weren't ready. You didn't listen. Responsibility is placed on the participant, not the substance. This framing matters. It preserves the tool by blaming the user, a pattern humans will repeat endlessly. Scholars argue whether this protected cultural practices or masked genuine danger. Either way, it works. You notice that those who guide these experiences gain influence. Not dominance exactly, but authority. Their interpretations matter. Their calm matters. This is power, even if it doesn't call itself that yet. Some researchers suggest that early religious hierarchies grew directly out of intoxication management. Others argue that social leaders simply absorbed these practices into existing structures. Watching who speaks and who listens, it's hard not to see the hierarchy forming. There's also exclusion now. Some people are discouraged from participating. Too young, too unstable, too disruptive. This isn't cruelty, it's risk management. Still, it creates an inside and an outside. Access to altered states becomes access to meaning. That's a dangerous equation, and you can feel it tightening. One night, you sit sober while others journey. This perspective shift is jarring. You see how strange it all looks from the outside. The murmuring, the gestures, the intensity. You also see how focused it makes them, how bonded. This duality sticks with you. Intoxication can look like chaos or cohesion depending on where you stand. Both views are true. As the group settles, stories are told about what was seen. They don't match perfectly, but they rhyme. Over time, the rhymes become canon. Certain interpretations harden. This is myth crystallizing. Scholars debate whether myth emerged to explain altered states, or whether altered states reinforced myth. Listening to the same story told slightly differently each time, you realize the loop feeds itself. You lie down later, sober and thoughtful, staring at the stars. The world feels crowded now, not physically, but symbolically. Every plant might carry a message. Every dream might mean something. This adds richness, but also weight. You've traded simplicity for depth, and there's no going back. Humans will keep stepping into altered states, not just to feel different, but to feel guided, connected, significant. The spirit world didn't exist until you kept visiting it. Now it's busy, loud, and deeply woven into how you understand reality. And once that door is open, history shows it never really closes again. Pain becomes the next frontier, because pain never politely asks for permission. It arrives suddenly, through a twisted ankle, a bad cut, a sickness that settles in the chest and refuses to leave. You've always endured it because endurance was the only option. Now you know that's not entirely true. Certain plants dull it. Certain brews soften its edges. This discovery changes everything, quietly and permanently. You watch someone with a broken tooth chew a bitter root and sigh with visible relief. The relief doesn't last forever, but even temporary mercy is revolutionary. This is one of the most important historical facts in the entire story of intoxication. Many of the earliest drugs humans used were analgesics. Long before recreation or ritual, people wanted the pain to stop. Archaeological evidence suggests early humans used salicylate-rich plants, opium poppies, and numbing herbs thousands of years ago. The debate is whether these were discovered through trial and error, or inherited knowledge from even earlier ancestors. Either way, pain taught humans where to look. You begin to associate altered states with healing. Not miracles, bones don't magically reset, but comfort, rest, sleep. Sleep itself becomes easier when pain is quieted. This matters more than anyone fully understands yet. Recovery improves survival. Those who heal faster hunt again sooner, gather again sooner, contribute again sooner. Intoxication quietly proves its usefulness. But the line between healing and escape is thin. You notice that some people seek the numbing plants even when pain isn't obvious. Emotional pain counts too, though nobody calls it that. Grief, fear, loss, they all hurt somewhere inside the body. A fringe but increasingly supported idea among historians is that early humans may not have separated physical and emotional pain at all. Relief was relief. Watching someone chew the root after a death in the group, you understand why that distinction wouldn't matter. This creates tension. Some argue that medicine should be reserved for injury. Others shrug and say suffering is suffering. There's no formal debate circle, but you hear it in tone, in sideways glances. Control begins creeping in again, not from authority, but from concern. Scholars still argue whether early drug regulation emerged from moral judgment or resource management. When supplies are limited, generosity has boundaries. You also learn dosage matters. Too little does nothing. Too much sends someone into frightening confusion. This is where knowledge becomes precious. Who knows the right amount? Who remembers which route is safe? Mistakes are costly. One wrong plant, one wrong preparation, and someone doesn't wake up. These losses carve rules into memory more effectively than any lecture. A quirky detail from modern research helps explain what you're seeing. The human brain rapidly associates relief with whatever preceded it, strengthening habits quickly. You don't know the neuroscience, but you recognize the pattern. Someone who finds relief once will seek it again. Repetition feels logical. Comfort feels necessary. This is how dependence begins, not dramatically, but reasonably. Still, the benefits are undeniable. People survive injuries that once would have ended them. Elders linger longer, carrying knowledge forward. This extended lifespan might be one of intoxication's quietest contributions to human culture. More time alive means more stories, more teaching, more continuity. Some scholars argue that medicine mattered more to civilization than agriculture. Watching elders pass down plant knowledge, you're inclined to agree. Healing practices become ritualized too. The same roots, the same chants, the same careful timing. This isn't superstition yet. It's pattern recognition dressed in ceremony. Ceremony helps memory. Memory saves lives. Whether the spirits are involved or not becomes almost beside the point. You sit by someone recovering, the air thick with plant smell and quiet hope. They sleep deeply, breathing steady. You feel something close to gratitude. Not to a god, but to the knowledge itself. The world is still dangerous, but it's less absolute than it used to be. Suffering is no longer mandatory. As night falls, you reflect on how this all started with smoke drifting the wrong way into curious lungs. Now that same curiosity is easing pain, extending lives, reshaping responsibility. Getting high wasn't just about feeling different, it was about feeling better. And once humans discovered that difference, they never stopped refining it, arguing over it, protecting it, and sometimes abusing it. You stare into the fire, steady and sober, aware that relief is powerful, seductive, and necessary. The plants don't care how you use them. The question, as always, is whether humans will learn to care enough about each other to use them wisely. Once something proves useful, humans start guarding it. That's the shift you feel now, not dramatic, not announced, but unmistakable. Knowledge about altered states is no longer evenly distributed. Some people know more, some remember better, some control access. What began as shared curiosity is slowly becoming managed experience. You notice it in small things. A plant is moved out of easy reach. A preparation is done behind turned backs. Someone hesitates before answering a question they would have shared freely before. This isn't cruelty, it's caution mixed with status. A solid historical fact supports this pattern. In many early societies, specialized knowledge, medical, ritual, astronomical, was closely guarded, often passed down through specific lineages. Scholars debate whether this secrecy protected communities from harm or entrenched early power structures. Watching it happen, it feels like both again. Altered states now come with permission, not formal permission but social cues. A nod, a look, an understanding of when it's appropriate and when it's not. This is regulation before rules. You see people self-censor, opting out when they sense disapproval. The experience hasn't changed, but the context has, and context shapes everything. There's also pride now. Someone boasts about how deep they went, how much they took, how fearless they were. This is new. Intoxication starts brushing up against identity. Who you are becomes tied to how far you're willing to go. Anthropologists argue that this may be one of the earliest forms of competitive behaviour unrelated to survival. Risk for reputation. You watch it with unease. This feels like a bad idea even without knowing why. One night someone goes too far. The preparation is wrong. The dose is heavy. Panic erupts. They thrash, scream, injure themselves. The group intervenes, restraining, soothing, waiting it out. They survive, but the mood shifts. Fear re-enters. This is one of those moments that leaves a permanent mark. Safety becomes a louder concern. Rules tighten again. A quirky but important detail. Many traditional cultures developed specific recovery rituals after intense intoxication. Cool water, certain foods, isolation, storytelling. These weren't afterthoughts. They were damage control. You start seeing the beginnings of that here. People sit with the shaken individual long after the effects fade. Meaning is assigned. Lessons are extracted. This is why we don't rush. This is why we listen. The debate among scholars is whether these structures reduced harm or simply gave the illusion of control. From your vantage point, they clearly reduced chaos, which is often enough. Humans don't need perfect safety. They need manageable risk. At the same time, something else is happening. Not everyone agrees with the new restrictions. A few people experiment in private. They sneak away, test plants alone, come back altered in ways the group didn't sanction. This is the first shadow culture of intoxication. Use without ritual, without supervision. It feels transgressive, thrilling, and dangerous. Anthropologists note that wherever rules appear, rule-breaking follows immediately. It's practically a law of nature. You see the tension this creates. Public use becomes orderly, symbolic, controlled. Private use becomes unpredictable. This split will echo through history endlessly. Sacred versus profane, medicine versus vice, accepted versus forbidden. The substances don't change, but the moral framing does. Despite all this, the core draw remains. People still seek altered states for relief, insight, bonding. The motivations haven't shifted, the governance has. You're watching society flex its first muscles, figuring out how to contain something powerful without crushing it entirely. As days pass, you feel more reflective during these experiences, less reckless. You notice younger members watching closely, learning not just the plants, but the attitudes. Caution is being taught alongside curiosity. That feels like progress, though you know progress is rarely permanent. You sit one evening, sober, listening to the low murmur of a guided trance nearby. Firelight flickers. The world feels balanced for now, but you can sense the fragility. Knowledge hoarded can rot. Rules can harden. Power can attach itself to anything that changes how people feel. The day humans first got high started with accident and wonder. Now it's tangled up with authority, identity, and fear. That doesn't mean it was a mistake. It means it mattered. And anything that matters this much will always be contested ground. You start paying closer attention to animals, partly out of curiosity, and partly because they seem to know things you don't. You've already seen them stumble on fermented fruit, or linger too long at certain plants, but now you watch with intent. A goat returns repeatedly to a patch of leaves that make it slow and dreamy. Birds pick berries that leave them wobbling on branches, chirping like the world just got funnier. This isn't random, it's preference. A solid historical and biological fact underpins this. Intoxication-seeking behaviour has been observed across numerous species, from elephants to birds to primates. Scientists still debate whether this behaviour provides evolutionary benefits, like parasite control or stress reduction, or whether it's simply a side effect of curiosity and opportunity. Watching animals choose the same substances again and again, it's hard not to see intention. You learn by imitation. Humans always have. If an animal eats something and lives, it's information. If it returns, it's a recommendation. This method isn't foolproof. Some animals tolerate toxins you can't, but it accelerates discovery. A quirky detail modern researchers note is that some plants evolved intoxicating effects to attract animals, encouraging seed dispersal. Which means, in a strange way, plants may have wanted you to get high. That idea sticks with you longer than you'd like to admit. You follow a monkey once carefully, as it chews a vine and then sits, unbothered, watching the world drift. You don't copy it immediately. You wait. This patience saves lives. Eventually the vine enters human knowledge, not as food, but as experience. Scholars argue about how much of early pharmacology came from animal observation versus human experimentation. From your perspective, the line is thin. Learning is learning, no matter who demonstrates first. There's a humbling effect to this. Humans like to think of themselves as discoverers, but here you're reminded that you're participants in a much larger biological conversation. Altered states aren't a human invention. They're a shared feature of life on this planet. That realization shifts your relationship to the practice. It feels less rebellious, more natural. You also notice something else. Animals don't moralize about it. They don't restrict access or shame each other. They partake when available and move on. This contrast highlights how quickly humans complicate things. Rules, meanings, hierarchies, all layered onto a basic neurological response. Some scholars suggest that moralization was inevitable once substances began affecting social order. Others argue it was a choice rooted in fear. Watching a deer wander off peacefully after its strange snack, you feel the tension. At night, someone brings up the animals during discussion. It becomes part of the explanation. The plants are meant to be used. The animals show us. This framing legitimizes intoxication in a powerful way. If nature endorses it, humans feel safer doing it. This argument will echo for thousands of years in different forms. Natural equals good, natural equals allowed. The debate over that assumption has never really ended. There's a downside to this thinking. Just because something is natural doesn't mean it's safe. You've seen animals die too, misjudging amounts or eating the wrong thing, but caution doesn't carry the same persuasive force as precedent. Seeing another creature survive lowers fear faster than any warning raises it. You feel a subtle shift in how intoxication is discussed. It's less about rebellion or escape now, more about alignment with the world. Being high feels like being in tune, briefly, with something older and wider than human concerns. This reframing makes the practice feel justified, even necessary. As the group prepares for another night, you notice how casually someone points out a plant, saying it belongs to the animals first. There's respect in that statement. Not ownership, but participation. You're borrowing an experience, not inventing it. Lying back later, altered but calm, you listen to insects and distant movement. You don't feel alone. The boundary between human and animal feels thinner tonight, as if you're all responding to the same invisible signals. Whether that's biology, coincidence, or something more is an open question scholars still debate. What you know for sure is this. Humans didn't invent intoxication. They noticed it, followed it, argued about it, and wrapped it in meaning. But the urge itself is older than language, older than fire. It lives wherever brains meet chemistry. And recognizing that doesn't make you feel smaller, it makes the story feel bigger. Eventually you learn the hard way that not every journey is gentle. The stories start circulating quietly at first. Someone who wandered off and didn't come back. Someone who returned changed in a way that never quite settled. You don't call them bad trips yet, but you feel the weight of them. Altered states, it turns out, don't care about your intentions. They amplify what's already inside you, including fear. One night you push further than usual. Maybe you're curious. Maybe you're trying to prove something. The preparation is familiar, the setting controlled, but your mind isn't. Thoughts spiral instead of drift. Sounds stretch too long. The fire feels invasive, like it's watching you back. Your heart races. You're convinced something has gone wrong, that you've broken a rule you didn't know existed. This is panic, raw and ancient, and it doesn't respond to logic. Someone notices and intervenes. They sit close, grounding you with touch and voice. This moment matters. Anthropologists argue that many traditional cultures developed calming techniques specifically to counteract overwhelming altered states, steady rhythms, reassurance, familiar objects. These weren't accidents. They were responses to real danger. You feel it working slowly, like being pulled back from deep water, one careful step at a time. When it ends, you're shaken, embarrassed, relieved. You don't want to talk about it right away, but the group does, not to shame you, but to understand what went wrong, what to avoid. This collective processing is one of the earliest harm reduction strategies humans ever invented. Scholars debate whether early societies truly understood psychological risk or simply reacted to visible distress. Either way, the result is the same. Caution deepens. A quirky detail from modern neuroscience sheds light on your experience. Substances that alter perception often disrupt the brain's ability to predict sensory input, which can create intense fear when the world stops behaving correctly. You don't know that language, but you know the feeling of reality slipping its leash. It's not enlightening, it's terrifying. After this, the tone shifts. Bravery stops being admired. Preparation does. You hear people emphasize mindset, rest, mood, intention, without knowing they're laying the groundwork for what modern researchers call set and setting. This concept, debated endlessly today, was learned painfully long ago. The environment matters, the mind matters. Ignore either, and the experience turns on you. Some people decide they're done. They step back permanently. Others continue more carefully. No one forces participation anymore. That's new. Choice becomes explicit. This quiet respect for boundaries is hard-won and fragile. It exists because fear taught it into being. You notice fewer exaggerated stories afterward. No boasting. No competitions. The culture sobers slightly without abandoning intoxication altogether. This balance between exploration and restraint is rare and temporary, but right now it holds. Lying awake later, sober and reflective, you realize something important. Altered states aren't inherently wise or foolish. They're amplifiers. They magnify whatever you bring with you: curiosity, grief, arrogance, fear. That makes them powerful tools and dangerous mirrors. Humans will keep forgetting this lesson and relearning it, over and over across centuries. But tonight, in this moment, the knowledge is fresh and sharp. You've seen the edge, felt it cut, and stepped back. That experience doesn't make you weaker. It makes you careful. And in a world like yours, careful is often what keeps you alive. Curiosity never disappears, but now it has an opponent: control. You feel it settling into the group like a second skin. Not oppressive, not cruel, just firm. After fear enters a system, boundaries harden. You see it in who speaks first, who decides when a ritual begins, who says when it ends. Altered states are no longer a shared experiment. They're something to be managed. This is where curiosity and caution begin their long argument. You hear it in conversations that circle without resolution. We learned because we tried. We survived because we stopped. Both statements are true, and both feel incomplete. Scholars still debate whether human progress has been driven more by reckless exploration or by the restraint that followed it. Living inside the tension, you realize progress usually comes from the friction itself. Someone proposes a rule. Only certain people should guide these experiences, not because others are unworthy, but because consistency reduces risk. It sounds reasonable. It always does. A solid historical fact backs this instinct. Many early societies formalized ritual leadership precisely to control unpredictable forces, whether fire, weather, or intoxication. The open debate is whether specialization protects communities or concentrates power. Watching a few voices begin to matter more than others, you feel both outcomes unfolding at once. There's resistance, of course. A few people push back quietly. They argue that the experience belongs to everyone, that no one owns the plants or the smoke or the visions. This is one of the earliest philosophical conflicts humans ever face: collective safety versus individual freedom. It won't be resolved tonight. It never really will be. You notice that language changes alongside the rules. Experiences are described less personally and more formally. Certain interpretations are repeated more than others. Wild variations are gently corrected. This isn't censorship yet. It's standardization. Anthropologists argue that this is how belief systems stabilize, by narrowing acceptable meanings. From inside the process, it feels like clarity. From the outside, it might look like loss. A quirky detail worth noting is that humans tend to remember emotionally intense experiences more vividly when they're framed by authority. When someone in charge interprets what happened, that version sticks harder. You don't know the psychology, but you feel the effect. Your own memories start aligning with the official telling. This is subtle, powerful, and a little unsettling. The private experimentation doesn't stop. It just goes underground. You hear whispers of people trying things alone, away from rules and expectations. Some come back glowing, others don't talk at all. This split deepens. Public intoxication becomes orderly, symbolic, purposeful. Private intoxication becomes risky, personal, and increasingly stigmatized. Scholars point out that this division appears again and again throughout history, regardless of culture or substance. Humans seem unable to keep these worlds merged. One night, you choose not to participate, not out of fear, but observation. You sit back, watching faces shift in firelight, listening to guided words steer inner worlds. It's effective. People come out calmer, aligned, reassured. You can see why control is appealing. It works, at least for most, but you also see what's missing. The raw wonder, the accidental discoveries, the strange insights that didn't fit neatly into existing stories. Those used to come from chaos. Order has a cost, and that cost is surprise. As the night winds down, someone thanks the guides, not the plants. That feels new. Authority is becoming person-centered rather than experience-centered. This shift will matter later, though you don't know how yet. Scholars argue that this moment, when intermediaries replace direct experience, is foundational to organized religion. Sitting there, you feel the distance grow. You walk away with mixed emotions. Safety has increased, depth remains, but something fragile has been traded away. You understand now that intoxication doesn't just alter minds, it reshapes social structures. Who controls access controls meaning, and meaning, once centralized, rarely stays neutral. The fire dims, the group disperses, you lie down under open sky, sober, thoughtful, aware that the story has shifted. Humans didn't just discover altered states, they discovered that altered states needed managing, and from that realization a whole new set of problems and possibilities begins. Farming sneaks up on you the same way intoxication once did, quietly, without asking permission. At first, it's just convenience. Why keep wandering when the plants you like can be encouraged to grow closer to home? Why trust chance when effort seems to work better? This logic feels harmless, even smart, but it changes everything, especially when the plants you favour aren't just food. You notice it with the calming leaves first. Seeds are saved deliberately. The strongest plants are protected. You water them. You talk about them. This is one of those underappreciated historical facts that reshapes the entire story. Agriculture didn't just domesticate calories, it domesticated consciousness. When humans began cultivating plants, they began amplifying their effects. Stronger strains, more reliable outcomes, less mystery, more potency. Scholars still debate whether psychoactive plants were among the earliest crops, or whether they followed food domestication. Some argue intoxication drove early agriculture, that the promise of altered states justified the labour. Others insist food security came first, with drugs riding along opportunistically. Standing in a clearing where certain plants clearly get more attention than others, the argument feels theoretical. Humans grow what they value. That's enough. With farming comes storage. With storage comes accumulation. Suddenly, altered states are available out of season, out of context. You don't need a special night or a long journey. The experience waits for you. This convenience changes how often people partake and how casually. The boundary between ritual and routine thins dangerously. A quirky detail archaeologists love is that residues of fermented beverages often appear in early pottery, alongside food storage, suggesting alcohol production scaled quickly once settled life began. Containers make intoxication portable and shareable. They also make it harder to say no. You see it already. Someone pouring a little extra, someone reaching again out of habit rather than intention. The social impact is immediate. Productivity suffers some days. Arguments spike. At the same time, evenings grow louder, warmer, more communal. Alcohol especially thrives in settled life. It rewards proximity. It punishes excess. You're watching a substance find its perfect environment. Control tightens again. Farming creates hierarchy. Owners, planners, protectors. Those same structures absorb intoxication management naturally. Someone decides how much is stored. Someone decides who gets access. This isn't villainy, it's logistics. Still, power concentrates. Scholars argue whether this moment marks the beginning of institutional inequality. You just feel the shift. The plants don't belong to everyone anymore. There's also innovation. Fermentation improves. Techniques spread. Potency increases. This arms race of effect is unintentional but relentless. Humans select for strength the way they always do, unaware they're also selecting for risk. A fringe but compelling idea suggests that increased potency of intoxicants may have driven early social instability as much as environmental stress. Watching tempers flare after heavy drinking nights, you suspect there's truth there. Medicine benefits too. Reliable access means reliable treatment. Pain relief becomes consistent. Sleep improves. Healing accelerates. This duality, help and harm intertwined, is sharper now. You can't dismiss intoxication as indulgence when it saves lives. You can't praise it unconditionally when it disrupts them. Rituals adapt. Some become seasonal, tied to harvests. Others fade, replaced by casual use. The sacred and the mundane blur. Scholars debate whether this dilution weakened spiritual practices or simply transformed them. Sitting at a harvest celebration that feels both joyful and sloppy, you sense something old slipping even as something new forms. You reflect on how far this has come, from accidental smoke to cultivated fields, from wonder to routine. The day humans first got high feels impossibly distant now, buried under layers of planning and storage. Yet the core sensation hasn't changed. The brain still responds the same way. Warmth, shift, distance. As night falls over the fields, you sit sober, listening to laughter carry farther than it used to. Settled life amplifies everything: joy, conflict, intoxication. You understand now that once humans learned to grow their altered states, there was no going back. Consciousness itself had entered agriculture, and like every crop it would need tending, pruning, and constant negotiation to keep from overrunning the field. Permission changes the feeling of everything. Once gods enter the picture, properly, formally, with names and personalities, Intoxication stops being just something humans do and starts being something allowed, or forbidden, or allowed only sometimes to certain people in certain ways. You feel the shift immediately. Wine isn't just wine anymore. Smoke isn't just smoke. These things now belong to someone. You see it at feasts first, big ones, loud ones, harvest celebrations where fermented drink flows freely, but only after a few words are spoken to unseen listeners, a gesture toward the sky, a portion poured onto the ground. This is a historical pattern so widespread it's almost suspicious. Nearly every early civilization tied alcohol or other intoxicants to religious ceremony. From Mesopotamian beer offerings to later wine cults, intoxication becomes a bridge between humans and gods. Scholars still debate whether gods were invented to justify intoxication, or whether intoxication was adopted to feel closer to gods. From inside the celebration, the distinction feels academic. You drink, and it feels different now. Not safer, not stronger, but sanctioned. That matters more than you expect. When an experience is framed as divine, guilt evaporates. Excess becomes devotion. A quirky detail archaeologists point out is that some ancient temples doubled as breweries or storage sites for intoxicants, meaning religion literally housed the means of getting high. That overlap wasn't accidental, it was structural. There are rules now, but they feel comforting rather than restrictive. Drink on feast days, abstain on others. Certain people, priests, celebrants, may partake more deeply, others less so. This selective permission solves a problem humans have been circling for a long time: how to allow intoxication without letting it unravel daily life. The solution isn't elimination, it's scheduling. You notice how effectively this works. People look forward to sanctioned nights. Restraint during ordinary days feels easier when release is promised later. This is one of those moments scholars point to when arguing that religion functioned as early social technology, regulating behavior through meaning rather than force. Intoxication slots neatly into that system. But permission also creates hierarchy. If the gods approve some uses and condemn others, someone has to interpret their will. Priests grow more influential. Their relationship with altered states is special, curated. They drink or inhale not for fun but for revelation. This framing elevates their experiences above everyone else's. Whether those experiences are actually different is another question entirely. You attend a ritual where the priest drinks heavily, then speaks in a slow, deliberate voice, eyes unfocused. The crowd listens in silence. This is powerful theatre, even if no one would call it that. A scholarly debate hums beneath the surface here. Were religious altered states genuine attempts at transcendence, or socially reinforced performances? Watching the effect on the crowd, you realise the answer may not matter. Belief does the work either way. There's a downside, of course. Unsanctioned intoxication becomes sinful. Drinking on the wrong day, taking the wrong plant without blessing. What once was curiosity is now disobedience. You feel the moral weight settle in. The same substance can now be sacred or shameful, depending entirely on context. Humans have always been good at that kind of contradiction. A fringe but fascinating idea suggests that some gods themselves may have been shaped by intoxication, their personalities reflecting the effects of substances used in their worship. Frenzied gods, gentle gods, ecstatic gods. Looking at the stories told around the fire, it's hard not to see the resemblance. The gods feel like amplified moods, stabilized into characters. Wine becomes especially important. It's social, agricultural, and symbolically rich. Blood of the earth, gift of the gods, proof of abundance. A solid historical fact. As societies became more complex, wine and beer often replaced other intoxicants in public ritual, because they were easier to standardize and control. Potency could be managed, distribution could be monitored. This wasn't just preference, it was policy. You start noticing how neatly intoxication fits into moral instruction. Drink too much, anger the gods. Drink properly, earn favour. Consequences are cosmic now, not just physical. This externalizes responsibility. If something goes wrong, it's not just about dosage or mindset, it's about offense. That's a powerful way to enforce behavior. Still, people push limits. They always do. Secret drinking, private trances. These acts now carry not just risk, but guilt. That changes the experience. Fear sneaks in. Shame colours the aftertaste. Scholars argue that moralizing intoxication may have increased psychological harm, even as it reduced visible disorder. You feel that trade-off keenly. At the same time, shared rituals are beautiful. There's cohesion here, singing, movement, collective release that leaves people calmer, closer. You can't deny the benefit. The gods give intoxication a frame sturdy enough to carry it across generations. Without that frame, it might have fractured society entirely. As the feast winds down, you sit quietly, feeling the warm drift fade. You think back to the first smoke by the fire, accidental and wordless. Now there are prayers, schedules, roles. Permission has tamed something wild without killing it. That's an achievement, even if it comes with strings attached. You realise then that intoxication will never again be just a personal experience. It's too useful, too dangerous, too meaningful. Once gods got involved, getting high became a matter of right and wrong, order and chaos, and humans, as always, will spend the rest of history arguing over who gets permission and who doesn't. Medicine and madness start sharing the same doorway, and nobody is entirely sure where one ends and the other begins. You feel this confusion settle into the culture like a low fog. The same plant that eases pain can also pull someone too far inward. The same brew that quiets grief can ignite chaos. Intoxication refuses to stay in a single category, and humans hate categories that won't behave. You see healers arguing softly near a fire. One insists a man's visions mean he's chosen. Another says he's sick and needs grounding, not encouragement. This argument echoes across time. A solid historical fact supports it. Ancient societies often treated mental illness and spiritual experience as overlapping phenomena, with intoxication acting as both diagnostic tool and treatment. Scholars still debate whether this helped sufferers or trapped them in roles that limited recovery. Watching the man in question rock gently, eyes unfocused, you can't tell which side is right. There's a growing awareness now that some minds react differently. Not better, not worse, just differently. Certain people go deeper, faster. Others struggle to come back. This observation leads to another quiet rule. Not everyone should partake equally. Again, it sounds reasonable. Again, it carries weight. Who decides whose mind is safe? Who gets excluded for their own good? You feel the discomfort of that question linger unanswered. A quirky but revealing detail from modern psychiatry mirrors what you're seeing. Substances that alter perception can trigger latent psychological conditions in vulnerable individuals. You don't have that language, but you see the pattern. Someone who was already on the edge drifts further after repeated journeys. The group responds with care at first, then distance. Compassion has limits when fear is involved. At the same time, some of the most insightful guidance comes from those same edges. People who feel too much often notice things others miss. They speak in metaphor naturally. They interpret dreams fluently. This fuels another scholarly debate that never really settles. Were early spiritual leaders unusually perceptive, or unusually unstable, or both? Sitting in the half-light, listening to someone describe the world in startlingly precise images, you realise the distinction might be artificial. Medicine adapts. Healers begin adjusting doses not just for bodies but for temperaments, calming plants for the anxious, grounding rituals for the overwhelmed. This is early psychiatry disguised as tradition. It's imperfect, inconsistent, but intentional. Humans are trying to care for minds without understanding them yet. That effort alone feels significant. Still, there are failures. Someone withdraws completely, refusing food, convinced the world is unreal. Another lashes out, convinced they're threatened by unseen forces. These moments frighten the group more than physical injury ever did. You can bind a wound. You can't easily bind a mind. Intoxication becomes suspect again, not as pleasure or ritual, but as catalyst. You hear the word balance more often now. Balance between body and spirit. Balance between use and restraint. Balance between insight and stability. This concept becomes a shield against uncertainty. If something goes wrong, balance was lost. It's vague enough to explain anything and comforting enough to accept. The debate continues quietly. Should altered states be used to treat troubled minds, or avoided entirely in those cases? There's no consensus. There never will be. You sense this argument branching outward into the future, into asylums, clinics, therapies, controversies. The seeds are here. You sit with someone who no longer joins the rituals. They're calm now, quieter, grounded. Maybe abstinence helped. Maybe time did. You realize that for all the power intoxication holds, sometimes the most effective medicine is distance. That lesson is hard-earned and rarely remembered. As night falls, you reflect on how thin the line has become. Intoxication can heal, reveal, connect. It can also fracture, isolate, unmoor. The same doorway opens onto different rooms depending on who walks through. That doesn't make the doorway evil. It makes it demanding. Humans will keep trying to sort medicine from madness, insight from illness. They'll invent diagnoses, treatments, laws, and labels. But the confusion you're living in now never fully disappears. It just gets better vocabulary. You watch the fire burn low, steady, and controlled. Fire taught humans this lesson first. The thing that cooks food can also destroy homes. Intoxication is no different. The challenge isn't whether to use it. The challenge is learning who it helps, who it harms, and how to tell the difference before it's too late. Power changes the scale of everything. What once passed quietly between hands now moves along roads, rivers, and coastlines. You feel it as soon as trade expands beyond familiar faces. Substances travel farther than stories, and they travel faster than caution. Intoxication leaves the camp and enters the empire. You watch caravans arrive carrying unfamiliar bundles, resins wrapped in cloth, dried leaves with sharp scents, jars sealed tight against leaks and curiosity. These aren't gathered locally. They're imported, which instantly makes them valuable. A solid historical fact anchors this shift. Some of the earliest long-distance trade networks moved intoxicants, opium, cannabis, wine, fermented drinks, alongside spices and metals. What alters the mind proves as desirable as what sharpens a blade. Distance adds mystique. If something comes from far away, it feels special, powerful, maybe even superior. You notice people speak about these substances with reverence, even before trying them. This is the beginning of branding, long before the word exists. Scholars debate whether the appeal was chemical or cultural. Did the effects matter more, or the story attached to them? Watching faces light up at the mention of a distant origin, you suspect the story did a lot of the work. Empires prefer consistency. Roads, laws, taxes, all designed to make outcomes predictable. Intoxication resists that impulse, but empires try anyway. Wine becomes standardized. Beer recipes stabilize. Measurements appear. This isn't about pleasure, it's about control. A quirky but revealing detail is that some ancient states paid workers partly in alcohol, rationed carefully to maintain morale without destroying productivity. Getting high becomes policy. You see who benefits first. Soldiers drink to dull fear before battle. Labourers drink to forget the ache in their backs. Elites drink in controlled abundance, surrounded by rules and servants. Same substance, different framing. Anthropologists argue that intoxication often mirrors social hierarchy rather than flattening it. From where you stand, it's obvious. Power determines how safe indulgence is. Trade spreads not just substances but habits, drinking styles, rituals, expectations. A brew once sacred becomes casual elsewhere. A plant once medicinal becomes recreational in a new context. This cultural remixing accelerates use and confusion at the same time. Scholars still debate whether this diffusion enriched societies or destabilized them. You've seen both outcomes in the same week. There's money involved now, real stakes, taxes on wine, monopolies on production. Smuggling emerges as soon as regulation does. This is another historical constant. Wherever intoxicants are controlled, black markets bloom. Humans are remarkably consistent that way. You hear whispers of cheaper, stronger versions made outside official channels. They're dangerous, they're popular, they're inevitable. Empires also use intoxication strategically. Feasts for allies, gifts for leaders, shared drinking to seal agreements. A fringe but compelling theory suggests that intoxication played a role in diplomacy, lowering inhibitions and speeding trust, sometimes wisely, sometimes disastrously. You attend a banquet where negotiations blur as cups refill, promises are made easily. Regret arrives the next morning, punctual as always. Religion adapts too. State gods approve state substances. Local intoxicants are absorbed, rebranded, regulated. Others are banned as foreign, corrupting, or dangerous. This selectivity isn't about chemistry, it's about loyalty. What you're allowed to consume says something about who you belong to. Scholars argue that substance regulation often doubled as cultural boundary making. Watching certain brews declared unclean overnight, you don't doubt it. The scale introduces a new problem: dependence at population level. When entire cities drink daily, consequences compound. Accidents increase, violence spikes, productivity fluctuates. Records, rudimentary but telling, begin noting problems tied to excess. This is where moral panic starts finding paperwork. Laws appear limiting hours, quantities, locations. None of them fully work. A quirky historical detail illustrates the tension. Some ancient rulers tried banning intoxicants outright, only to reverse course when unrest followed. People didn't just want the substances, they expected them. Intoxication had woven itself into daily rhythm. Remove it suddenly, and something breaks. You feel the anonymity of scale change the experience too. Getting high among strangers is different. Less accountability, less care. Ritual fades, consumption accelerates. This isn't universal, but it's noticeable. The intimacy that once made altered states feel contained doesn't survive cities intact. Scholars argue that urbanization altered drug use more than any single substance ever did. Standing in a crowded market where drinks change hands quickly, you believe them. Yet innovation flourishes here too. Distillation improves, new combinations emerge, medicine advances with broader access and experimentation. Pain relief becomes more reliable, surgery becomes possible. This is the contradiction at the heart of empire. Harm and progress advancing together, powered by the same tools. You reflect on how far the journey has come, from accidental smoke to taxed wine, from shared wonder to regulated commerce. Intoxication now fuels economies, armies, rituals, and rebellions. It's no longer just part of human life, it's infrastructure. As night settles over stone buildings and busy streets, you watch lamps flicker and hear laughter spill from doorways. People are still chasing the same feelings: relief, connection, escape. The scale has changed, not the desire. Empires rise and fall, but the substances move on, carried by traders, soldiers, and the quietly curious. You understand now that once intoxication entered systems of power, it could never be simple again. It would always be negotiated between profit and safety, freedom and order, pleasure and control, and humans, endlessly inventive, would keep finding new ways to tip the balance, then argue about it afterward. Repetition changes the relationship. What once felt rare now feels expected, and expectation quietly reshapes the brain. You notice it first in yourself. The warmth doesn't arrive as quickly. The drift doesn't go as far. You drink a little more, inhale a little longer, waiting for the old feeling to show up. This is tolerance, though you don't have the word yet. You just know something has shifted. A solid historical fact supports what you're sensing. Repeated exposure to intoxicants leads the brain to adapt, dulling effects over time. Ancient medical texts, even very early ones, describe increasing doses needed to achieve the same relief or pleasure. Scholars debate how clearly early societies understood this process, but they undeniably observed its results. Watching someone pour a second cup without hesitation, you see adaptation in action. Dependence creeps in quietly, disguised as routine. A drink before sleep becomes necessary to sleep at all. A calming plant becomes part of the morning, not the ritual. This isn't dramatic. No collapse. Just absence felt more sharply than presence. When the substance isn't there, something feels off, irritable, heavy. You realize that intoxication has stopped being an addition and started acting like a requirement. This alarms some people. They talk about weakness, about forgetting how to endure. Others push back, saying life has changed. Work is harder, cities louder, expectations heavier. Both arguments feel true. Scholars still debate whether dependence is primarily chemical or social. Sitting in a crowded settlement where stress never fully lifts, you suspect context matters as much as chemistry. You see the costs accumulate. Someone trades food for drink. Someone neglects work. Someone snaps too easily. These aren't isolated incidents anymore. Patterns form. Communities begin recognizing certain behaviors as problems rather than accidents. This is where addiction, as a concept, starts trying to take shape, long before anyone can define it cleanly. A quirky detail from later historical records reflects what you're witnessing now. Some ancient laws punished drunken behavior, while simultaneously guaranteeing access to alcohol. The contradiction is telling. Society condemns excess but enables it anyway. You watch this tension play out in real time, public shame paired with private supply. At the same time, not everyone struggles. Some people maintain balance effortlessly. Others never touch intoxicants at all. This variability frustrates attempts at explanation. If one person can drink daily without harm and another falls apart, what's the difference? Character, biology, luck. The open scholarly debate stretches into the future, unresolved. From where you sit, the unfairness of it is obvious. Tolerance changes culture too. Rituals escalate. Stronger brews, larger quantities, longer nights. What once would have been overwhelming is now barely noticeable. This arms race doesn't feel intentional, but it is relentless. Humans push boundaries simply because the boundaries move. You hear elders complain that it wasn't like this before. They're right, it never is. There's also nostalgia now, for the first times, the deep journeys, the meaningful nights. People chase those memories, convinced they can recreate them with more of the same. This is one of the saddest loops you witness. The past becomes a benchmark the present can't meet. Scholars later call this the hedonic treadmill. You just feel the disappointment. Still, dependence doesn't erase value entirely. For some, regular intoxication is what keeps them functional. Pain management, emotional regulation, survival in harsh conditions. This complicates judgment. Is reliance always a failure, or sometimes a strategy? The question lingers unanswered, heavy with implication. Communities respond in uneven ways. Some restrict access further, others accept dependence as a cost of civilization. A few experiment with abstinence periods, forced breaks tied to seasons or rituals. These pauses help some people reset, others count the days until they end. No solution fits everyone. You sit one evening watching someone tremble slightly as they wait for their drink. You don't see weakness. You see adaptation pushed too far. The body learned too well. This realization softens your judgment. Intoxication didn't betray anyone. Humans simply asked it to do too much. As night deepens, you reflect on how desire, repetition, and relief tangle together so tightly. The first high was accidental. This stage is anything but. It's deliberate, habitual, woven into daily life, and once a substance occupies that role, removing it isn't just about stopping a behaviour, it's about reshaping a life. You understand now why every society that embraced intoxication eventually struggled with it. Not because humans are flawed, but because brains adapt. Pleasure fades. Relief demands renewal. The same mechanisms that made altered states useful also make them dangerous over time. The fire burns low, cups empty, refill, empty again. This rhythm, seek, adapt, repeat, feels endless, and maybe it is. Humans will keep learning, forgetting, relearning. Tolerance will rise, rules will tighten, new substances will appear, but the underlying dance between desire and diminishing returns will always feel familiar. Lines harden when patience runs out. You feel it in the air before anyone says it out loud. Intoxication has become too visible, too disruptive in the wrong places, and suddenly the question isn't how to use it, but who should be allowed to. This is where outlaws and holy men quietly step onto the same stage. Rules are announced with a kind of moral confidence that suggests they've always existed. Certain substances are declared improper for ordinary use. Certain behaviours become punishable. Yet in the same breath, exceptions are carved out. Priests may drink, healers may administer, rulers may indulge. Everyone else is expected to show restraint. This pattern is one of those stubborn historical facts that repeats across cultures. When substances are restricted, elites often retain access under sacred or official justification. You notice how quickly language shifts. What was once use becomes abuse. What was once curiosity becomes temptation. Words sharpen into tools. Scholars debate whether this moral framing was necessary to maintain order or simply convenient for maintaining hierarchy. Watching who gets punished and who gets excused, the answer feels uncomfortably clear. Outlaws appear almost immediately. Not dramatic villains, just ordinary people who don't fit neatly into the new expectations. Someone drinks when they're not supposed to. Someone trades a forbidden plant quietly. Someone seeks relief without permission. These acts aren't rebellion at first, they're continuity. People doing what people have always done, but now there's risk attached. At the same time, holy men gain prestige. Their altered states are framed as service, not indulgence. When they drink or inhale, it's for the people, for the gods, for healing. This separation matters deeply. The same behaviour carries opposite moral weight depending on who performs it and why. Anthropologists argue that this distinction allowed societies to preserve the benefits of intoxication while blaming its harms on marginalised groups. Standing in the crowd, you feel the imbalance settle in. A quirky but telling detail from later records mirrors what you're seeing now. In several ancient cultures, drunkenness was condemned among commoners, but celebrated in rulers as a sign of divine favour or heroic excess. Same behaviour, different story. Humans are remarkably flexible when morality meets power. Enforcement is inconsistent. Some nights, rules are ignored. Other nights, they're enforced harshly. This unpredictability creates fear, not safety. People hide their use. Secrecy replaces guidance. Intoxication moves from communal spaces into shadows. Scholars still debate whether prohibition increases harm by removing social safeguards. Watching people drink alone, fast and nervously, you suspect it does. Yet not all restriction is cruel. Some communities genuinely reduce chaos. Violence drops. Work steadies. Families feel safer. This complicates the narrative. Control isn't always oppression. Sometimes it's triage. The challenge is that once control exists, it rarely stops where it's most useful. You meet someone who straddles the line, a healer punished for using the wrong plant at the wrong time. Their intention was care. The rule was clear. The punishment is real. This is where systems reveal their priorities. Intention matters less than compliance. The open scholarly debate here is whether early legal codes around intoxication prioritized outcomes or obedience. From where you stand, obedience is winning. Despite all this, substances don't disappear. They adapt. New names, new forms, new routes. Smuggling becomes sophisticated. Recipes change to avoid detection. This cat-and-mouse dynamic feels inevitable. Wherever humans have tried to suppress intoxication completely, innovation has surged in response. It's almost as if curiosity resents being told no. Holy men argue among themselves too. Some believe intoxication is essential for communion. Others insist purity requires abstinence. This internal conflict shapes entire traditions. One group drinks to meet the divine. Another fasts and denies the body to do the same. Scholars debate whether these opposing paths reflect cultural preference or neurological difference. You notice that both camps produce conviction and followers. You watch a ritual where the priest drinks deeply, then condemns common drunkenness moments later. The crowd nods. No one laughs. The contradiction is normalized. This is power speaking in metaphor. Meaning bends to authority. Outlaws develop their own codes. Share quietly. Protect each other. Don't draw attention. This subculture carries its own ethics, often more consistent than official ones. You realize that whenever a practice is driven underground, it doesn't vanish. It reorganizes. Sometimes it becomes safer, sometimes far more dangerous. As the years pass, labels stick. Drunkard, addict, heretic, visionary. These labels shape destiny. Once applied, they're hard to escape. Scholars argue that moral labeling around intoxication may have caused more lasting harm than the substances themselves. Watching someone shrink under a word, you understand how that could be true. You sit one evening between two fires, one public, sanctioned, calm, one hidden, risky, alive with tension. Both involve the same desire, to feel different, to cope, to connect. The difference lies entirely in permission. You realize now that intoxication didn't create outlaws or holy men. Humans did that in their effort to control something that touched too many parts of life. The substances simply revealed existing fault lines between power and need, order and relief. As night settles, you feel the weight of the divide. Some people will always be allowed to seek altered states openly. Others will always be punished for the same impulse. This isn't an accident, it's structure. And once built, it's incredibly hard to dismantle. The day humans first got high never anticipated this outcome. Smoke didn't carry moral judgment. Plants didn't demand permission. But humans, faced with scale and consequence, built fences around experience. Some gates are gilded, others are locked. And history will spend a very long time arguing over who deserves the key. Some knowledge doesn't disappear by accident. It's buried deliberately, wrapped in fear and sealed with authority. You start noticing gaps. Plants no one talks about anymore. Techniques mentioned only in whispers. Stories that trail off before reaching the important part. This isn't forgetting. It's choosing not to remember. You hear elders reference an old way, something practiced before the rules tightened. They don't explain it fully. They just shake their heads and say it's not safe now, not appropriate, not allowed. A solid historical fact supports this pattern. Many ancient cultures actively suppressed earlier ritual practices during periods of religious reform or political consolidation. Archaeological evidence often shows abrupt disappearances of substances or symbols that were once widespread. Scholars still debate whether this was about genuine harm reduction or ideological control. Listening to the unfinished stories, you feel the weight of intention behind the silence. Some techniques vanish because they worked too well. They produced experiences that didn't fit the approved narrative, visions that contradicted doctrine, insights that empowered individuals rather than institutions. Those practices become dangerous, not chemically, but politically. You watch as they're rebranded as heretical, demonic, or foolish. The plant doesn't change, the story does. A quirky but revealing detail from later history echoes this moment. Several psychoactive plants known to indigenous cultures were labelled poisonous or evil by conquering societies despite centuries of controlled use. The classification wasn't based on toxicity alone, it was based on who controlled the experience. Power prefers predictable outcomes. You notice that suppression doesn't erase memory completely. It fragments it. Songs lose verses, rituals lose steps, ingredients are replaced with milder substitutes. Over generations, the experience fades, becoming symbolic rather than visceral. Scholars argue whether this dilution preserved cultural continuity or hollowed it out. Watching a ritual that feels more performative than transformative, you suspect something essential has been lost. There's grief in this loss, though it's rarely named. People sense that something deeper used to happen, something more intense and meaningful. They compensate with spectacle, larger gatherings, louder chants, stricter rules. But volume can't replace depth. You feel the absence like a missing note in a familiar melody. Not all knowledge stays buried. It leaks. Healers remember fragments. Outlaws preserve recipes. Families pass down warnings disguised as myths. This is how forbidden knowledge survives, broken into pieces too small to attract attention. A fringe but compelling scholarly idea suggests that many fairy tales and cautionary legends encode information about psychoactive plants and altered states, hidden behind metaphor. Hearing a story about a witch's brew or enchanted fruit, you wonder how much truth is tucked inside. You also see how loss breeds rediscovery. People experiment again, unaware they're retracing old paths. Sometimes they get it right. Sometimes they make dangerous mistakes that earlier knowledge would have prevented. This is the cruel irony of suppression. It often increases harm by removing context. Scholars debate whether lost traditions could have offered safer frameworks for altered states. Watching a young person suffer needlessly, you feel the answer in your chest. At the same time, suppression simplifies governance. Fewer substances, fewer rituals, fewer unpredictable outcomes. Order improves, leaders sleep better. This is the trade-off societies keep making. Depth for stability, mystery for control. Whether that's wise depends on who you ask. You sit with someone who remembers an older practice almost clearly. They describe sensations unlike anything you've experienced. Stronger, stranger, more immersive. You can't tell if they're exaggerating or if something truly has been lost. Memory is unreliable, especially when filtered through nostalgia. Scholars argue endlessly about whether ancient experiences were genuinely more profound or simply mythologized. You're left unsure which might be the most honest position. As years pass, the buried knowledge sinks deeper. New generations don't even know there was something to forget. That's when suppression succeeds, not when people are afraid, but when they're unaware. The silence becomes normal. Yet even then, the urge doesn't die. Humans keep seeking altered states, even if they don't know the old names or methods. New substances emerge, new rituals form. The desire reroutes around obstacles like water around stone. You realize that while specific knowledge can be buried, the impulse that created it cannot. You stare into a carefully managed fire, smaller and tamer than the ones of earlier days. You feel safe. You also feel constrained. Safety and loss sit side by side, hard to separate. The day humans first got high opened a door that has been repeatedly narrowed, guarded, and partially sealed. But it's never been fully closed. Somewhere beneath the layers of rule and forgetting, the old knowledge still hums, in stories, in symbols, in the quiet sense that reality once felt wider. And occasionally, when someone stumbles into the wrong smoke or tastes the wrong plant, that buried past breathes again, briefly, dangerously, reminding humanity of what it chose to hide. You can feel it in your own head now, the contradiction between how modern your world feels and how ancient your wiring still is. Tools change, settlements grow, rules multiply. but the brain you carry is fundamentally the same one that leaned too close to the first strange smoke. That realization lands quietly and refuses to leave. You notice it in moments of stress. When danger spikes, when grief hits, when routine feels unbearable, your mind still reaches for altered perception as a solution. This isn't weakness, it's design. A solid scientific fact, though you wouldn't call it that yet, explains why. The human brain evolved reward systems that respond powerfully to novelty, relief, and pattern disruption. Those systems are ancient, far older than agriculture, religion, or law. Scholars debate whether modern societies underestimate how deeply these systems shape behaviour. Living inside one, you'd say they absolutely do. You watch children play, spinning until they fall laughing, dizzy and disoriented on purpose. No substances involved. Same goal. Altered consciousness through motion. This is a quirky but telling detail. Humans instinctively seek altered states even without chemicals. Spinning, chanting, hyperventilating, sleep deprivation, all can shift perception. Substances didn't invent the desire, they just made it efficient. This understanding reframes everything. The urge to get high isn't a cultural accident. It's an extension of how the brain explores possibility. Some scholars argue that altered states helped humans imagine futures, rehearse threats, and escape rigid thinking. Others warn that this framing excuses harmful behaviour. Both arguments miss something important. The urge exists whether it's praised or condemned. You see this mismatch play out everywhere. Societies build strict norms, but individuals keep bending them. Laws say one thing, brains say another. The tension never resolves because it can't. Culture moves faster than biology, but not fast enough to overwrite it. Modern routines amplify the problem. Repetition dulls attention. Work narrows focus. Days blur together. The brain, hungry for variation, looks for exits. Altered states provide them. Whether through drink, smoke, ritual, or exhaustion, humans keep finding ways to step sideways out of ordinary awareness. You realize this isn't rebellion, it's regulation. The brain trying to balance itself. A fringe but increasingly discussed idea among scholars is that societies might function better if they acknowledged this need rather than denying it. Structured release instead of shame. Education instead of suppression. You've seen hints of this working in earlier eras, feast days, rituals, seasonal breaks. When those disappear, excess fills the gap. You also notice how modern explanations struggle with meaning. Chemicals are named, effects are mapped, but the subjective experience, the why, remains slippery. People still talk about feeling connected, expanded, relieved. Those words haven't changed in thousands of years. Technology adds precision, not purpose. You sit one evening sober, watching people chase altered states through different means. Some drink, some dance, some pray. Some push their bodies until thought dissolves. Different paths, same destination. The variety is new, the destination isn't. This continuity is oddly comforting. It suggests that despite everything, empires, prohibitions, rediscoveries, humans are still trying to solve the same internal problem: how to live inside a mind that never fully rests. Altered states are one answer among many, not perfect, not safe for everyone, but persistent. You think back to the earliest nights by the fire. No language, no doctrine, just sensation and curiosity. That brain still exists inside every modern skull, quietly waiting for permission or opportunity. Scholars debate whether modern humans are better or worse at managing this inheritance. You suspect the answer depends on honesty. Denying the urge doesn't erase it. Romanticizing it doesn't protect against harm. Understanding it, really understanding it, might be the only path that ever had a chance. But understanding requires humility, and humans struggle with that. As the day ends, you feel the weight of continuity pressed gently against the present. The past isn't gone. It's layered beneath every decision, every craving, every ritualized escape. The day humans first got high didn't end with caves or gods or empires. It continued inside the nervous system, carried forward invisibly. You lie back, breathing evenly, aware that no matter how sophisticated the world becomes, the ancient switches are still there, waiting. And the question humanity keeps circling, without quite answering, isn't whether those switches exist. It's whether we can learn to live with them without pretending they don't. Eventually, science shows up late to a conversation that's been going on forever. It doesn't arrive with humility. It arrives with instruments, measurements, and the confidence that naming something is the same as understanding it. You watch the shift happen slowly, first with curiosity, then with authority. What was once described in stories and symbols is now pulled apart into parts. Plants are dissected, brews are analysed, effects are timed, compared, quantified. This is a genuine historical turning point. The rise of formal scientific inquiry into intoxicants transforms them from mystical tools into chemical agents. Alkaloids get isolated, active compounds get named. Scholars debate whether this moment demystified altered states or simply translated them into a new language. From where you stand, it does both, and neither fully. There's power in precision. Pain relief improves dramatically when dosage becomes reliable. Surgery advances because unconsciousness can be induced predictably. This is not a small thing. A solid historical fact underscores it. Modern medicine is unimaginable without anesthetics and controlled intoxicants. What once required ritual courage now requires a trained professional and a calibrated amount. Lives are saved quietly, efficiently, but something else is lost in the process. Meaning thins. Experience gets flattened into effect. Instead of asking what someone saw or felt, the question becomes how much they took and what receptors were involved. This shift solves many problems and creates others. Scholars argue about whether reductionism improves safety at the cost of insight. Sitting through a sterile explanation of a once profound experience, you feel the absence keenly. A quirky detail that captures this tension. Early scientific experiments with intoxicants often involved researchers dosing themselves repeatedly, chasing objectivity through subjectivity. They trusted their own altered minds to report accurately, even as they tried to remove meaning from the equation. This contradiction is almost poetic. Science wanted neutrality, but it had to pass through experience to get there. Debates erupt. Are altered states merely chemical noise, or do they reveal something real about consciousness? Some scientists argue that hallucinations are meaningless byproducts of disrupted brain function. Others insist they offer insight into perception itself. This argument never quite settles. The data grows. The question remains slippery. You notice how language shifts again. Spirits become symptoms. Visions become side effects. Journeys become episodes. This reframing carries authority. It also carries dismissal. Experiences that once guided communities are now often treated as errors to be corrected. Scholars debate whether this represents progress or cultural loss. Watching people struggle to describe life-changing moments in clinical terms, you suspect the answer is complicated. At the same time, science brings validation to things long dismissed. Pain relief isn't imaginary. Anxiety reduction isn't moral weakness. These states have mechanisms, causes, predictable patterns. This recognition reduces stigma in some places, even as it creates new hierarchies elsewhere. Now, legitimacy depends on diagnosis, prescription, approval. You see altered states divided cleanly on paper, medical versus recreational, therapeutic versus abusive. In practice, the lines blur immediately. Someone drinks to sleep. Someone uses medicine to escape. Someone finds insight where only side effects were expected. Science draws boxes. Humans overflow them. A fringe but increasingly discussed idea emerges that ancient cultures understood set and setting intuitively, while modern science rediscovered it reluctantly. controlled environments, supportive guides, intention. These factors matter as much as chemistry. Research begins circling back toward context, acknowledging what rituals always knew. Watching this slow return, you feel a strange sense of déjà vu. Technology accelerates everything. Synthetic versions appear, stronger, faster, purer. Nature is no longer the limit. This escalation thrills and terrifies in equal measure. A solid historical fact grounds this fear. Many modern intoxicants are orders of magnitude more potent than their ancestral counterparts. The margin for error shrinks. The consequences intensify. Regulation struggles to keep up. Laws trail innovation. Ethics committees argue. Public opinion swings wildly between fear and fascination. You recognize the pattern immediately. It's the same cycle you've seen before, just faster. Discovery. Use, harm, control, repeat. You attend a lecture where a researcher explains consciousness as circuitry and feedback loops. It's elegant, convincing. And yet, it doesn't touch what you felt during your first altered night. The warmth, the wonder, the sense that something inside you had shifted irreversibly. Science explains the how brilliantly. The why remains elusive. Some scholars suggest that science didn't replace ancient understanding, it specialized it. One handles mechanisms, the other handled meaning. Problems arise when one pretends to be sufficient alone. You feel that imbalance often now. Data without wisdom, experience without context. As night falls, you sit quietly, aware that science hasn't ended humanity's relationship with intoxication. It's simply reframed it again. The substances didn't disappear. The debates didn't resolve. They just gained new vocabulary. You think about how far this road stretches, from accidental smoke to laboratory synthesis, from awe to analysis. And yet, when someone alters their consciousness today, the core experience still echoes the past. Disorientation, insight, relief, fear, connection. The brain responds the same way it always has. Science may be late, but it's here now, and it's not leaving. The challenge ahead isn't choosing between ancient wisdom and modern knowledge. It's learning how to let them speak to each other without one trying to silence the other. You breathe out slowly, grounded in the present, aware that even with all the instruments and theories, humanity still doesn't fully understand why altered states matter so much. Maybe that's not a failure. Maybe it's a reminder that some questions aren't meant to be closed, only approached carefully from more than one direction at once. Fear always arrives wearing the mask of protection. You recognize it immediately, because you've seen it before. Whenever something powerful slips beyond easy control, wonder turns suspicious. Curiosity starts getting framed as danger. Altered states, once tolerated or even celebrated, become problems to be solved. This is where the war over wonder begins. Not a single conflict, but a long campaign fought in laws, headlines, classrooms, and quiet family conversations. Substances are no longer just substances, they're symbols. A solid historical fact anchors this shift. Many modern governments launched large-scale prohibition efforts in the late 19th and 20th centuries, driven as much by social fear and moral panic as by evidence of harm. Scholars still debate whether these movements were primarily about public health or social conformity. Living through the cultural tension, it feels like both, tangled together. You notice how language sharpens again. Gateway, corruption, degeneracy. These words don't describe chemistry, they describe anxiety. The fear isn't just about what altered states do to individuals, it's about what they might do to order. A mind that can step outside routine might also step outside obedience. That possibility makes institutions nervous. A quirky but telling detail illustrates this perfectly. During several prohibition periods, substances associated with marginalized groups were targeted more aggressively than chemically similar ones used by elites. Same effects, different enforcement. This inconsistency reveals the real battlefield. The war isn't against intoxication itself, it's against uncontrolled meaning. Education becomes a front line. You hear simplified explanations offered with absolute confidence. These substances destroy lives. Full stop. No nuance. No context. Scholars argue whether fear-based education reduces harm or simply drives curiosity underground. You've already seen the answer in earlier eras. Suppression doesn't eliminate desire, it reshapes it. Underground cultures flourish again. Hidden rituals, secret experimentation, online communities trading experiences like contraband. This repetition is almost comforting in its predictability. Humans respond to bans the way water responds to pressure. They find cracks. A fringe but increasingly accepted theory suggests that prohibition cycles may actually accelerate innovation, producing stronger, riskier alternatives. Watching new substances emerge faster than rules can track them. You believe it. Meanwhile, science fractures into camps. Some researchers focus on harm, cataloguing risks with grim precision. Others quietly study benefits, therapeutic potential, creativity, mental health applications. This internal debate grows heated. Funding follows fear more easily than curiosity. Wonder has to justify itself now. Armed with data, you sit in the middle of this conflict, feeling the cultural whiplash. One voice insists altered states are a plague. Another whispers they might be medicine. The public oscillates between panic and fascination, often holding both at once. Scholars argue that societies tend to overcorrect, swinging from permissiveness to repression and back again. You feel that pendulum in your bones. There's personal cost here too. People hesitate to talk honestly about their experiences. Insight becomes secretive. Relief becomes shameful. Someone who might have found help stays silent instead. This is one of the least visible harms of the war over wonder. Lost conversations, lost guidance, lost chances to learn from each other. A solid scientific fact complicates the narrative further. Controlled studies increasingly show that some altered states, when used carefully, can reduce symptoms of depression, anxiety, and trauma. This doesn't mean they're harmless. It means they're complex. The debate rages over whether public policy should reflect nuance or prioritise caution at all costs. Watching lawmakers argue in absolutes, you suspect nuance doesn't campaign well. You notice something else too. Wonder doesn't actually disappear under attack, it just migrates. If substances are forbidden, people chase altered states through extreme sports, deprivation, obsession, workaholism. The brain doesn't care where the shift comes from, it just wants the shift. Scholars argue whether societies that suppress chemical intoxication unconsciously encourage other, sometimes more dangerous forms of escape. The pattern is hard to ignore. Media plays its part, amplifying extremes. Sensational stories travel faster than boring data. One tragedy outweighs 1,000 quiet recoveries. Fear spreads efficiently. You understand why. It's adaptive. But adaptation isn't the same as wisdom. You attend a public debate where one side speaks of control and safety, the other of freedom and exploration. Both are right. Both are incomplete. The real question, how to integrate wonder without letting it consume everything, barely gets airtime. It's too hard, too slow, too unsatisfying. At the same time, cracks appear in the wall. Therapists quietly advocate. Veterans speak openly about relief. Patients demand access. The narrative begins shifting again, not toward wild permissiveness, but toward cautious re-evaluation. Scholars note that every moral panic eventually exhausts itself. Evidence accumulates, stories soften edges, policy lags behind lived reality, as always. You reflect on how familiar this feels. Ancient bans, sacred permissions, outlaws and healers, science and fear. The war over wonder isn't new, it's just wearing modern clothes. The battlefield has changed, but the stakes haven't. As night settles, you think back to the first accidental smoke. There was no fear then, no agenda, just curiosity and sensation. That innocence can't be recovered, but maybe something else can. Balance. Honesty. A willingness to admit that altered states are neither salvation nor damnation. The war continues loud and messy, but underneath it wonder persists quietly, waiting for moments of openness. Humans have always returned to it eventually, not because it's safe, not because it's easy, but because some part of the mind refuses to accept that ordinary awareness is all there is. And no matter how fierce the battle gets, that refusal keeps finding ways to breathe. You start noticing echoes everywhere, hiding in plain sight. The ancient highs didn't vanish. They learned how to wear disguises. They slipped into legal categories, cultural habits, wellness trends, and weekend routines. Modern life insists it's rational, regulated, sober-minded, but the old impulses are still steering quietly from the back seat. You see it in caffeine rituals. Morning coffee isn't just fuel, it's a socially sanctioned psychoactive experience, complete with withdrawal symptoms and identity markers. A solid historical fact backs this up. Caffeine is the most widely used psychoactive substance in the world, normalised so thoroughly that its intoxicating effects are barely acknowledged. Scholars debate whether this normalisation makes society healthier or simply blinds it to dependence. Watching people joke about not being human before their first cup, you suspect the latter has a point. You see it in pharmaceuticals. Pills prescribed for focus, calm, sleep, motivation. Taken responsibly, they help millions function. Taken thoughtlessly, they flatten life into compliance. The debate rages over where treatment ends and enhancement begins. This argument isn't new. It's just wearing lab coats instead of feathers and beads. The substance changed. The question didn't. You see it in festivals, concerts and clubs. Temporary villages built around rhythm, light and altered perception. Music pounds, bodies move in unison, time dissolves. Sometimes substances are involved. Sometimes they're not. The effect is similar either way. Anthropologists point out that these gatherings mirror ancient communal trance rituals almost perfectly, minus the mythology. Same beats, same loss of self, same craving for connection. A quirky detail that makes this continuity impossible to ignore. Studies show that synchronized movement and sound can release neurochemicals similar to those triggered by certain intoxicants. You don't need smoke if the drum is loud enough. Humans have always known this instinctively. Modern culture just pretends it invented it. You also see echoes in the wellness world. Breathwork sessions, ice baths, meditation retreats promising ego death by Sunday afternoon. These are altered states carefully rebranded as health. Scholars argue whether this represents progress, safer, intentional practices, or avoidance, a way to chase intensity without admitting that intensity is the goal. Sitting through a guided breathing session that leaves people shaking and euphoric, you feel the resemblance too strongly to dismiss. Entertainment plays its role as well. Virtual reality, immersive games, endless scrolling that bends time until hours vanish unnoticed. These aren't intoxicants in the chemical sense, but they hijack the same attention systems. A fringe but increasingly discussed idea suggests that modern technology functions as a kind of behavioral drug, potent, accessible, and lightly regulated. Watching someone emerge from a digital haze looking dazed and overstimulated, you recognize the look. You realize something unsettling. Modern society didn't eliminate altered states. It industrialized them, optimized them, distributed them at scale. The ancient fire has been replaced by screens, prescriptions, playlists, and algorithms. The delivery systems are cleaner. The consequences are harder to see. This makes regulation even trickier. It's easy to point at a plant or a drink and say yes or no. It's much harder to regulate experiences woven into productivity, healthcare, and identity. Scholars argue that modern societies struggle more with behavioral addictions than chemical ones, precisely because they're harder to isolate. Watching people negotiate boundaries with their own devices, you believe it. Despite all this, the language of wonder never fully disappears. people still talk about breakthroughs, flow states, losing themselves, feeling alive again. These phrases echo ancient descriptions almost word for word. Different era, same yearning. You sit quietly, observing how casually people step in and out of altered states without naming them as such. The denial feels strategic. If it's normal, it's not dangerous. If it's productive, it's not indulgent. This selective blindness keeps society moving, but it also prevents honest conversation. You think about how earlier cultures at least acknowledged what they were doing. They named the doorway. They built stories around it. Modern culture pretends the doorway doesn't exist, even as it pushes people through constantly. Scholars debate whether this lack of acknowledgement increases harm. Your instincts say yes. Unnamed forces are harder to handle responsibly. As evening settles, you reflect on the strange symmetry. Humans started by stumbling into altered states accidentally. Now they engineer them deliberately, then act surprised by the outcomes. Control has improved. Self-awareness hasn't always kept pace. You realise that echoes aren't just remnants of the past, they're messages. Reminders that the urge never left, only adapted. If anything, modern life amplifies it by compressing meaning, accelerating pace, and rewarding constant stimulation. Altered states offer relief from that pressure, even when they arrive disguised as productivity or self-care. You lie back, letting the day fade, aware that history didn't move in a straight line away from intoxication. It spiraled, folding old impulses into new forms. The ancient fire still burns. It's just been scattered into millions of tiny everyday flames. And whether people acknowledge it or not, they're still gathering around them, seeking warmth, distraction, insight, or just a moment where the world feels different enough to breathe. You finally understand that there was never just one day. The day humans first got high didn't end when the smoke cleared, or when the rules appeared, or when science arrived with clipboards and charts. It never ended at all. It stretched quietly into every era that followed, changing shape but never letting go. You feel this realization settle slowly, the way deep truths do, not as a revelation, but as recognition. Humans didn't invent intoxication and then move on. They entered into a relationship with it. And like most long relationships, it's been affectionate, abusive, transformative, disappointing, healing, and impossible to quit entirely. A solid historical fact makes this undeniable. No known human society has existed without some method of altering consciousness, whether chemical, behavioural, or ritual. Every culture finds a way. Scholars debate whether this universality points to a biological necessity or a cultural inevitability. Sitting with the full arc of the story behind you, it feels like both. The need is internal. The expression is negotiated. You look back at the earliest moments, accidental smoke, curious inhalation, laughter by firelight, and compare them to now. The substances are stronger, the rules are thicker, the debate's louder, but the core motivation hasn't changed. Humans still want relief from pain, escape from monotony, connection to each other, and glimpses beyond the ordinary. Intoxication has always offered a shortcut to those things, for better or worse. A quirky detail from modern anthropology brings the story full circle. Brain scans of people in altered states show patterns strikingly similar across vastly different substances and practices. Different paths, same destination. The brain doesn't care much how it gets there, it just responds when it does. That consistency explains why this story refuses to end. You also see now why the argument never resolves. Intoxication is too useful to ban completely, and too dangerous to embrace without limits. It helps some and harms others. It builds community and fractures families. It fuels art and addiction, medicine and madness. Any story that tries to simplify it will fail. Humans keep trying anyway. That's part of the pattern too. Each era believes it will finally get it right. Perfect regulation, perfect freedom, perfect balance. Each era discovers the same thing. Altered states amplify whatever system they're poured into. If a society is compassionate, they can heal. If it's unequal, they deepen harm. The substances are mirrors more than causes. You realise that the day humans first got high didn't just change how people felt, it changed how they thought about reality itself. Once you know the world can feel different, you can't fully trust any single version of it. That uncertainty fuels philosophy, religion, science, and rebellion. It makes humans restless. It also makes them creative. As the long night of history winds down, you don't feel judgment rising. You feel something closer to acceptance. This urge, this reaching beyond the default state, isn't going away. It can be guided, it can be educated, it can be softened with honesty, but it can't be erased without erasing something fundamental about the human mind. You think about the future now, stretching forward the way the past once did. New substances, new technologies, new ways of slipping sideways out of ordinary awareness. The debates will restart with fresh vocabulary. The fears will sound urgent, the hopes will sound familiar. And somewhere, someone will inhale something unexpected and feel that ancient shift for the first time, convinced they've discovered something new. They haven't. They've joined a lineage. As you lie back, letting the story finally slow, you feel the weight of continuity settle into something gentler. Humans didn't fail by getting high. They learned something dangerous and powerful about themselves early on, and they've been trying to live with that knowledge ever since. The day humans first got high never really ended. It became background noise, sometimes loud, sometimes barely audible, threaded through survival, belief, medicine, art, and escape. It's there when people celebrate. It's there when they grieve. It's there when they try to forget and when they try to understand. And as sleep begins to pull at you, one last thought drifts through, calm and unhurried. History isn't just a record of what humans did. It's a record of what they felt brave enough to try, scared enough to control, and curious enough to repeat. The fire has burned low, the smoke has thinned. But the impulse that drew humans close to it in the first place is still warm, still present, still quietly humming beneath everything.